So I'm sure you'll remember last year, Jennifer Lawrence and some other celebrities were hacked. Nude photos of them were posted online. How many of you took a sneaky look and went to one of these websites to have a look at a naked Jennifer Lawrence? I've got 3 hands up. Brave souls, thank you for admitting that. I suspect the number is greater than that. You're not going to tell me that today, and that's the very point I'm trying to make, not to embarrass you. Illustrate the point that actually, when we go online, when we wear that veil of anonymity that the internet allows us, we can go to places and do things without other people noticing. We wouldn't dream, presumably, of lurking outside Jennifer Lawrence's house and peering into a bathroom to see her getting changed. Online, our attitudes and behavior change. Most of the time, that's fine. Most of the time, that's a terrific freedom that we all enjoy on the internet, something to celebrate. After all, the right to a private life is something that's cherished very much within our societies. But of course, Jennifer Lawrence is entitled to her privacy as well. So where there's an upside, there's a downside as well. And I think that characterizes one of the essential elements of the internet, this dichotomy of value. The internet gives us enormous freedoms, but at the same time serves as a means by which it can abuse our privacy, and certainly a means by which it can damage our safety and security. I'm familiar in my life with both sides, the good and the bad of the internet. With my family, I enjoy the freedoms. When I come to work at Europol, I see a side of the internet that is darker and worse perhaps than most people can see. It has become now the principal instrument of organized crime and terrorist activity. You'll know, of course, the greatest part of the infrastructure of the internet is below the surface of what most people see and use every day. And as part of that deep web, there is the Darknet. This Darknet area is host to a very high number and a great range of hidden services and marketplaces on places like the Darknet that trade in drugs, firearms, fake IDs, any other kind of illicit commodities that you can imagine, at a fantastic rate that is growing really, really quickly. Most of that is illegal. An academic study last year of the Darknet found that over 50% of these marketplaces were devoted to criminal purpose alone, and that there were 2.5 million daily users of the Darknet. That's a lot of criminality going on under our noses, generally undetected. Police might tell you here in the Netherlands, elsewhere in Europe, the drugs problem is declining. Fewer seizures, fewer arrests. Actually, it's moving online. Today's equivalent of that shady character who used to lurk on the street corner to push his drugs is someone in the comfort of his own home doing that at a much greater industrial scale, selling any type of illicit drug at any quantity almost, with almost a zero risk of being caught. And things are not much better above the surface. Forget the Darknet, even in the area of the internet that we all use. Banks, for example, are under considerable attacks right now from very, very sophisticated cyber criminals using malware to penetrate the deeper reaches of their information security and to perpetrate the kind of financial losses that we wouldn't have even imagined a few years ago. The latest operation involving Europol found that a months-long, very carefully coordinated attack to penetrate global banks in that case, to take control of the system administrators' rights, to take control of the banking payment systems, even the ATM network, global losses, almost $1 billion, again from somebody in the comfort of his bedroom, probably somewhere in Ukraine or Russia. And don't let me start talking about child sexual abuse, because that horrible trade has been absolutely transformed by what's possible on the dark and in other parts of the internet. So why is this happening? It's because criminals are smart people in the main, some dumb ones as well, I'm glad to say, but people who are exploiting the terrific technological innovations that are part of everyday life, of how the internet is growing. There is now a virtual underground criminal economy, a very large one, crime as a service business model that's supplying to cybercrime gangs almost 1 million different variants of malware every year to steal people's data, to defraud them, and to carry out a whole range of cybercrime attacks that are now becoming increasingly difficult to manage. But also, they're wearing that veil of anonymity themselves, of course, and using that to hide their identity. More than that, they're using the high-grade encryption that has become a part of the modern internet to prevent themselves from being detected, and doing it very, very well indeed. So we should ban encryption, right? No, of course not. Of course we shouldn't ban encryption. Encryption is a regular part of the way in which the internet works. E-commerce would collapse without it. I don't even think the Tornet should be banned, quite frankly, because it offers a wonderful avenue for dissidents in certain countries, for example, to communicate in a safe way. As a police chief, even I recognize that, and I say that, but I also say let's have a better balance between security and privacy online. And here, this is the other thing about the way our attitudes seem to change when we think about the internet. We seem to sort of underappreciate the security dimension of it. Perhaps we think that because it's a virtual world, there are virtual security threats with no real world consequences. Maybe that's what we think. All of us lock our doors at home and our cars, but not all of us would make sure that we have the latest antivirus software on our computers, that we change our passwords regularly, for example. Teenagers grow up following their parents' advice not to talk to strangers. But the average 18 to 24-year-old online now has 629 Facebook friends, most of which they've never even met physically, but have given them carte blanche to enter into their lives through this digital window, to follow them, to see who they're talking to on a daily basis. Why is that? I think legislators also maybe are following the same security paradigm. They haven't yet legislated the internet as a modern instrument of life in the same ways they've done other areas. Other instruments like air travel, international banking, for example, even mobile telephones, have been the product of democratic deliberation and security by design. So now we have legislation that allow police to intercept private telephone calls of suspects, compel banks to operate strong anti-money laundering controls over international banking systems, for example. And here, in Europe, when Schengen Agreement was introduced in the 1990s to abolish internal border controls, what a wonderful opportunity that was for citizens and commerce. But at the same time, legislators made sure that they took certain measures to increase cross-border police cooperation, to make sure, therefore, that criminals and terrorists couldn't exploit those new freedoms when they were introduced. Where's that balance between privacy and security in the online environment? I don't see it. Of course, the development of the internet has been different. Its rapid organic growth in particular hasn't given much opportunity to introduce that regulatory control and balance. Of course, not that we should give up on that. We should still try to find that balance, but it's going to be a lot more difficult because of the global dimensions of the internet in particular, and how you can introduce some global areas of governance in something that has grown in an organic way to something today that we didn't perhaps plan for or even ask for, but it's something that we're actually left with. But it's the one part of our life in which there are far fewer security safeguards than any other part of our life. That's a fact now. Maybe legislation is the key, I'm not sure. Maybe we should try. But in the meantime, at least, let's make sure that there's a kind of public-private partnership that's at least as good, at least as well developed, as there is in those other areas that I mentioned, with telecommunication operators, with the banking sector, for example. There are some good signs. At the European Cybercrime Centre in Europol, we have established some very effective relationships with the major tech firms. They're working very hard to help us. They're also helping us develop new proposals to identify and take down terrorist content online. These are very good, but at the same time, we know that the latest innovations in encryption, in particular by industry, are making the job for police even harder to identify and to track the offenders. I don't think that they're doing that deliberately, of course, to make the police job even harder. Of course not. But at the same time, I get the sense that we're not really on the same page, the police and the industry. It's led some, in my sector, for example, to argue for the introduction of a backdoor for encryption, so that specialist government agencies can have the right to break certain encryption at a certain time. But clearly, if you do that, the deliberate engineering of security vulnerabilities in our digital systems obviously has some major downsides as well. And of course, it's a principle that is implacably opposed by most in the tech sector. And that in particular, I think, illustrates the fact that there has been a serious decline in trust between governments and industry, especially following the allegations made by Edward Snowden. We need to repair that trust. And at Europol, I'm convinced that we will play a part in doing that in the most proactive way, that we can work with industry, at least on a voluntary basis, to make things much, much better between us. Because I know that the digital age has changed our lives, but police are still in the same business of preventing crime, tracking offenders, and getting the necessary evidence by which to convict them. It's just that the information for us to do that now is largely in the hands of private companies running online services. We need access to that information in a reasonable way. To do that, we need to build their trust, repair their trust, so that together, therefore, I think industry and law enforcement leading the way can make sure that all of us can enjoy both a free and a safe internet. Thank you.